Welcome to the Wildflower Learning Podcast, where we talk about everything education with leading experts in mental health fields, educational fields, parents, and kids themselves. We hope you enjoy. Okay, so this is our second conversation with Khanh Tran. We interviewed him back in February. Well, I did one-on-one with Khanh, and for the second one, we had Ellen and Tiffany in the conversation as well, and they're here with me now to talk about some takeaways and things we noticed in the conversation, and even our own personal journey of trying to become more conscious when we interact with kids and others, and then things we're still wondering about as we're going through this journey. So Ellen, how's your conscious parenting journey going?
I think it's good that we call it a journey, because I don't think there will ever be a point of arrival. There's no destination really in mind. It is the becoming. So in that, I think it's a thing that I keep showing up for every day. I think I have wins and days where I wish I may have done things differently, but overall, I think it's going pretty good. Cool. How's yours going?
Same. I mean, it's right, there's ups and downs.
Yeah.
In the sense of, I think Dr. Tran talked about this in the workshops, these layers of things I'm discovering in myself, and these tendencies and knee-jerk reactions of whatever they might be. I'm becoming more aware of those things. And I'm definitely seeing the upside of when I'm in the right mind space, interacting with Fern or other kids, things just go more smoothly, I feel like. And then even like the end goal of if I'm trying to help a kid get to a point, it just goes a lot better as opposed to the rigid kind of scolding or being more rigid with the approach. But there's definitely those days where it doesn't seem to be working, and you just have to keep plugging along.
Right, and even that is an elevated state of consciousness when we're noticing when it doesn't go well. And I think Khanh reminds me of that often. Even the noticing where it could have gone differently, it may have gone better if I had just da-da-da-da-da. Even that is a new plane of awareness. So we can celebrate the tiny wins even in the midst of being reflective on how we may want to respond differently in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the growth piece, right? Where failures, which we try to get the kids to see.
Yeah.
When you feel like there's a failure, it's a great opportunity to grow.
Absolutely.
Tiffany, what's your experience been like?
Hard, I guess. The whole dealing with kids and trying to make sure when you come across a fight, you're you want to get in there and you want to jump in and you want to go no, stop. And then you have to make sure you're stopping yourself in your brain before you say something that you're going to regret in 15 minutes. And just take a breath, just calmly approach it. Don't add to the chaos. Diffuse the chaos, and just get everyone to take a breath and calm down a little bit, and then go from there.
Yeah.
I love that. I think I've heard it said before that the whole chaos piece, right? If you come in with all this energy, you add to the chaos. The only way to diffuse that is to share peace. So if you're not in a peaceful state, you can't come in and bring peace to something if you're, chaotic energetically at that point too. Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, I have an example for that. There was a day we were trying to do circle up at the end, and we split the groups up, right? We have olders doing a circle up and we have the youngers. And the whole week, it was just a struggle of getting the kids, right? They were wanting to play tag and do all these things and run around. And I'd been trying to plead with them and talk to them and threaten tickets and all those things. And, it would work for a split second and then they'd be off somewhere else. And then one day I just decided, I'm just going to sit down and tell Miles to start going and, lead the circle up. And it went so much better. It just fizzled out, right? 2 or 3 kids started joining, and then more started joining, and then it just, it's circle time, right? Instead of the... So I didn't I was bringing chaos into the situation before, and then in that example, I feel like it was a better way to approach it. Not to say that'll work every time, but it did that time.
That's the other thing about conscious anything. It's like, it's not a formula. Every time you're going to probably have to be on your toes and be ready to do what the situation calls for rather than this prescribed method.
Yeah. You think you have like, I have my little formula and like my little steps that I take when I see if I'm like, okay, I'm ready to tackle this. And then like, I go in there and nothing works and I'm like, oh, I'm out of ideas.
Yes, it is a journey for certain.
What are things you're still wondering about?
I am still probably struggling the most with what if you started this consciousness process and your kids are already, let's say, like half grown maybe, or even, I mean, I have a teenager at this point too. So starting, I would use air quotes, late. I think we just do the best we can with what we know. When we know better, we do better, right? Maya Angelou said that. So being gracious with ourselves in the process, but I'm still wondering what is the best way to implement it in a way that's gonna be impactful for your kids? And is there a way to, I always want like the fast way, is there a way to like super infuse that consciousness into them? If you're not starting when they're 6 months old or, 2 years old. So those are some things I'm wrestling with those concepts still a little bit.
Yeah. And for me, related with that, from the parenting side, if you're not skilled at noticing my thoughts and my emotions and how they're impacting the kid, I wonder if there's like a scaffolding or some sort of a support where you're pulling in some of your old parenting styles with the chaos of home, right? Like if there's just a chaotic situation, I'm not sure how to approach it in a conscious way. Is there like that stepping stone of, okay, I'm still going to use these strategies until I figure out better ones? Because what I think can happen is parents freeze, right? There's a situation where it's, really chaotic and they don't know what to do. And so there's no interaction at all.
Sure.
And my worry there is the kid creating these new habits of maybe not handling of my emotions and those things.
Yeah.
Is it creating this monster?
Right. Well,
in the meantime, while you're trying to figure this out.
Yeah, it almost adds more insecurity to the situation because then, if mom or dad isn't sure how to handle the situation, so we pull back from the situation.
Yeah.
Now we're supposed to be co-regulating,
right.
But there's nobody to co-regulate because we're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to back off and maybe not do anything. And you kind of get into that. I have a tendency to make anxious dogs. I don't know. Let's not get into it right now. But I've heard it said that if the puppy is trying to be the parent, it creates anxiety. In dogs, completely removed from humanity. But it'll create a dog with anxiety if you're not firmly the one in charge at home. So if you have a puppy new to the family and you're not standing in that role of leadership, I'll say, it'll start to try and do some of that for you. And then the puppy becomes this really insecure, anxious little ball of nerves, right? Like I can see that in our kids. So if we don't think we know what we're doing, so then we shrink, they will start to try and kind of fill in the parenting gap there, which does create really ineffective coping mechanisms for them in the long run. So we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in transition. So I think, and in this episode we talked to Con, and one of my questions was about boundaries, because I think that's the other misnomer here with consciousness, that I'll just sit and feel my own feelings, but I won't impose my feelings on you. So I'll just let you do whatever you do, and I'll just handle myself over here, which that does slip really quickly into permissive parenting, which we've talked about, the nuanced differences in there. And they are nuanced. So you do really need to pay attention to those. But I think remembering that natural consequences are a good thing for all of us. We need to know where our parameters are. We need to know what I'm responsible for and what you're responsible for, so that I'm not doing your job all day and you're not doing my job all day. It would be inefficient, right? So at home, I think it's okay for us to remember, and again, we talked about this in this particular episode with Con, managing boundaries is still our responsibility as parents. And not being okay with a particular behavior or response means we get to say, well, I am not willing to be talked to that way. You are not allowed to treat me in that way. Those bring up bad feelings, and we don't need to give people permission to be offensive. I don't know why we would all of a sudden think, oh, I better let my kid do that to me either, so conscious versus permissive, I think we really need to keep our eyes on what does that mean.
All right, well, these are all great things. We should probably have another episode.
Every time.
I think we've said that every time. So, okay, well, enjoy the episode. Okay, we're here today for the second time with Dr. Tran. We had a podcast with him maybe a month and a half ago or something like that. And you talked about conscious parenting. And in that podcast, it was on how the parent needs to focus on themselves and work on being present and noticing how they're interacting with their kid. So this episode, we thought we would talk about practical strategies of how can we start to cultivate that ability. And since the last podcast, took some questions from parents about what conscious parenting is and some of the things they heard. So we'll talk about that as well. We have Ellen with us this time.
Hi, guys.
And Tiffany actually is with us as well. Hello, Con.
Good morning.
So what we thought we'd do to start is have you lead us in a formal approach to helping us become skilled at being present.
Sure. This is something I teach kids and adults. It's just a practice of paying attention, so I can start. So take a moment. If you're willing, you can close your eyes. We close our eyes so that there'll be less distractions. So close your eyes for a moment and then listen. So you're paying attention, listen. So as you're paying attention, you're listening and you're hearing all those sounds around you. You're just noticing. Notice. Just paying attention to all those sounds around you. And if you're visual, you can imagine that your mind is like a soft, warm blanket wrapping itself around those sounds you hear, ever so gentle. So you're listening gently. So in a moment I'll count to 3, and on 3 we'll return to this space. On 3. One. 2. 3. If you can, slowly, gently open your eyes, mindful, notice. And continue to pay attention.
All right, thank you. So there's that formal side of it, and then an informal piece that we can integrate into our day-to-day lives as we're at work or driving or at home doing things. And both of these, the whole purpose of this, right, is the brain plasticity piece, which is if we're having certain states of mind, they'll integrate together and become habits over time. So what are some examples of the informal thing we can integrate into?
Informal practices.
Yeah.
There are many. It's informal practice of mindfulness and meditation is practice during the day, throughout the day. in everything that you do, whether it's eating, drinking, driving, walking, typing, looking, listening. So opening, closing the door. You could be vacuuming, washing dishes, or just pure noticing. So things that you do during the day that you practice that helps you, these things while you're doing it helps you cultivate awareness.
Ellen, you have a couple of examples that you do.
Yeah, so Con and I were just talking as we were getting started and prepping for this. Since COVID has become part of our consciousness also, just noticing how many more times a day I was washing my hands, and how typically that is a transitionary point for me. So I need to wash my hands because I am about to make something for my kids to eat, or I am moving from one location to another to start a new activity, and that's the kind of thing I need to make sure that my hands have been washed. And turning that really normal moment that is now more frequent in my day into something where I can slow down. So I was telling Con that I'm the weird one in public restrooms now that takes a really long time to wash their hands, but it's because I'm letting the water run over my hands. And I think water has a really calming presence anyways. And so then to just focus in more on it allows it to just have a larger impact in my day. So I cup the water, I notice the temperature of the water, I notice the scent of the soap, whether it's mine at home and I've chosen it, or I am somewhere else and I haven't chosen it. I just take a couple of seconds really to just stand still and to feel what I'm experiencing and let that be a calm, kind of a touch point during the day. And I've integrated with kids too, this we're going to the park so often, or the weather is changing and I'm in it more than I ever have been before, really. So just noticing it's sunny out today. I feel the sun on my skin. Or when we're walking, I hear the crunching of the snow, or I notice the leaves are smushy and dead today. So those really informal, just moments during the day so I can make sure that I'm aware and present, and not just, having my thoughts take me somewhere else that I'm unaware of.
Yeah, other things I've heard people try, or myself as well, as even pouring something into a glass, right, or taking a drink of water, just taking that pause you're talking about, creating that as a habit, right, kind of keeps that integration and development going. So what about with kids? Last time we spoke, it was the big piece is just being present yourself as much as possible, because then they're going to see that, and when you interact with them, they'll feel it. But are there practical things you do with your kid to help them cultivate that further?
Yes, one of the things I did with Jasmine when she was younger, she would help set up the dinner table. So set up forks and plates and napkins. And I would notice how I did it was I would hand it over to her, and I watch as she placed them on the table. And I immediately, with excitement, walked over to her and then said to her, I couldn't help but to notice how mindful you laid down that fork. Can you do that one more time? And can I have a fork so that I can learn too? So I teach indirectly that way, where the child appears to be teaching me. And the other thing I think about when I consider that is the child's ever present, so she'll notice things. And again, with great excitement, I take joy and pleasure in that moment. Let's say when sometimes she'll walk out the whole house and she'll look up in the sky, and the sky is orange. And she'll stop and point that out, and I take a moment and I rest in that space. In that, for me, it helps me stay present, but that reinforces in the child the practice.
So how do you praise a child in a way that's not damaging? Is that the right word?
or maybe counterproductive,
counterproductive.
even.
Yeah. Because you had a slide, I can't remember which one, in your presentation that talked about, if we get kids focused on the image, like you're so beautiful, or you're so smart, like the damage that can cause.
Well, and even if your praise to Jasmine had been, "Oh, you did so good.
Yeah.
That was so good. Oh, look how pretty the table is. You've done such a nice job laying it out," right? What? Yeah, so I could see even that being that ambiguous kind of praise that isn't really fostering what we're going for.
That's fantastic response observation. I don't praise Jasmine. I just respond by having her notice what I notice. So remember, as conscious parent, it's not praising parenting, it's conscious parenting. So I'll give you an example. When she was about 5, it was Christmas time. We were going to take family Christmas pictures. She came into my room, and she was in her dress. As she was turning around, she asked me a simple question: "Daddy, do I look pretty?" And as a father who doesn't praise but prefers that she cultivate consciousness, how do you suppose, as a conscious parent, I would respond?
That's a tough position to be in, because of course you think she's pretty, but that's not what you want to feed, right? Of course you do.
Yes, I certainly did not want to reduce her to just that, where she thinks if she was in this dress, that makes her pretty, and if she wasn't, then she must not be. So my response was quite simple. I can't help but to notice the sequences on your dress. That's what I said. I can't help to notice the color. What color is that? And I don't even label what the color is, because she knows. Why would I want to impose myself?
That's a big one I have to work on, is the good job.
Oh, yeah.
Like, get a chore done, good job. It's just automatic.
It's the programming. We have to deprogram ourselves, which is, again, why parenting is about the parent, not so much about the child.
If you can just stay present and point out things, and you don't even have to. With my daughter, she does what she does, and I don't have to say I notice. Sometimes once in every blue moon, I demonstrate that I notice. So when she says, for example, "Look, Dad, the sky is orange," that was a couple weeks ago, I just look up. So I demonstrate that I notice. That's all that's needed.
I think where we got to these questions was because you had noticed, parents, and so had I, with if I go with gentle parenting, or if I go with conscious parenting, or if I go with this, more awakened state of that I'm going to have a child who is not able to handle life. If I'm always gentle and soft, how will they be ready for the quote-unquote real world? So we've got parents who are wondering if we take on this new way of thinking, this new way of practicing parenting, where really I am being reflective, I'm being present, I am modeling all of the noticing. If I'm not telling my kids what to do or how to be, and I'm not giving them those hard boundaries, or there's, those very clear expectations, which is what we've heard for a long time in the parenting world, that's what we're supposed to do to be good parents, right? We set a high standard and we expect them to make, consistent growth and progress in these different areas of life. You can rattle them off, whatever is meaningful to you. But if we come at this from a conscious way, where we allow our child to be and develop and grow on their own, and we're not praising, and we're not condemning, and we're not judging and evaluating, and doing constant progress reports at home, then are our children going to grow up to be adults who can't handle challenges, real world adversity, setbacks, failure? Are we going to create a child who's been so insulated with love and compassion that they won't know how to be? How would you respond to that?
Well, the children are already showing adversity. They do courageous and remarkable things, like climbing trees, right? As high as they want to.
Yeah.
I think where it sometimes goes awry is when we set limitations and what are standards, but not realizing, thinking that being a good parent means get down from that tree. We strip any semblance of resilience, and resilience is a powerful human trait. It's considered the holy grail of all human traits, and the one thing, if anything, if you could spend time cultivating, that would be quite the gift for that child. So you do so, cultivating resilience by start acknowledging their feelings or their experience without constricting or limiting, right? So if they're climbing that tree, they want to climb 60 feet high, well, I'll let them. Yeah, I gotta pause.
I know everyone just went, what?
It reminds me of
It's acknowledging.
like allowing them to suffer.
Oh, that is the greatest of all gifts you can offer to a child, allowing them to suffer. Let them break their bones, let them get stung by wasps, let them fall from a tree. What a wonderful gift. And, all you have to do is stay present to what is. Assist them when that time comes, but setting boundaries with yourself in that way allows them to, in that space, when they fall off the tree, as you're just present with them, and they're present in the moment, it's just a natural process. It's a part of life. And that's what I meant when I said that last time podcast. I believe people try to be authentic. We're intellectually gifted in terms of being able to define it, but rarely do we know what that truly means, because we can't live it, because we're so bombarded with information and expectations and standards. I think there's a whole different level of suffering there. It's called ontological suffering, that we're not really ourselves. Ontology is the study of being or becoming self. And anyway, that's for another talk.
So when they do meet a challenge of getting hurt or getting in a fight with another kid, can you go on how you would approach that with them? As far as, are you giving them advice? Say it's a social conflict. How would that go about? The kid's upset.
Two ways you can approach that. One, you can get between there, because they may need some guidance, and your presence in and of itself, if your presence is meaningful and credible to the child's perspective, then the child will reflect. And the other way is you can intervene by guidance. A good example, if two kids are fighting, you could go to one and remind the other his or her power of connection, meaning you can have that child teach you how to respond better if you were in his position to the other child. So having the child in the position of teaching, think about that, consider about that for a moment, what that creates in the child. That's pretty empowering. Yeah, and you're putting the child in a position to show and demonstrate. That's the other part of it. The demonstration is practice in humility, or practice. You responded.
Yeah, having them demonstrate it to you is just one more time that they're going through that whole process, and it is creating those neural pathways, and it's just getting deeper and deeper into their being. At that point in time, it's something that they'll be able to reference back the more times, but it's that like indirect practice, that indirect teaching where they don't necessarily know what you're doing or the depth of, but you do as this external, because you're just asking them to walk through that process one more time, and it just becomes their practice at that point.
Yeah,
That's powerful, I think.
You just made me think of how sometimes parents, I think with the best intentions, try to teach and show and demonstrate, but do so with a kind of attitude, the child will sense that attitude, will take in and internalize your lesson, but it's just intellectual. It's not practice. So the practice, that's what in conscious parenting, the practice has to begin with you. They need to see that you are present, for them to be present. And that's how they cultivate resilience. That's what resilience is. The essence of that is staying present to what is. So resilience, whether it's emotional, behavioral, or being resilient, it is really being in the moment of that challenge and being okay with that. Hence the power of presence. And that's what I do and I offer, whether it's for my child or the kids I see in therapy.
Okay, so that draws me to another question, especially if this is new information, new concepts. We keep talking, and a lot of times your response is, be present, bring your presence. For a parent who doesn't have a paradigm for this, maybe they're trying to shift from another parenting style and trying to understand. When you bring presence, what does that mean? And what does that look like? Even maybe what does that feel like?
That's such a great question. It's a kind of quiet focus where you're in the moment and you're tending to everything that's going on in that moment. That tending to is one, the child, and the other is yourself. So you're recognizing how you are experiencing this moment, and whether it's emotional, there's an emotional connection to it, or a cognitive connection to it, or behavioral, like agitation, right? Behavioral agitation. And then in recognizing that in that moment present, you capture that with the God-given ability or capacity to notice. And once you notice whatever that, let's say, emotion is, frustration or agitation, right? You're sitting with it. Just sitting with it. You're not responding or reacting, or you're not going to act from it. And then noticing the child, and noticing how the child is seeing you. Recognizing, that's called relational intelligence. Your ability to look at another human being and see yourself, and recognize the impact and influence that you have. So it's a hard task because human beings naturally tend to be reactive, but human beings naturally can be reflective as well. So you practice reflecting and noticing and thinking and listening. That's the practice of beginning. It's not just I'm listening to sounds around you, but the practice itself is a practice in presence.
Are there strategies you use? Well, I think there are, as far as using the child as like an anchor to help you be back in the moment. So like, I'm getting agitated. What can you do with the kid? So for instance, your example with Jasmine was once a month or twice. What was it? Twice every month? What could I do better as a parent?
Yes.
Right? That's a strategy that gives you information quick on what you need to work on. And you can start thinking about what you need to work on. Or as simple as, I heard one podcaster say they have their kid call them out when they're starting to get mad. Like, oh, there goes dad again. And that's his kind of mindfulness bell to be like, oh yeah. So are there strategies there you use with kids?
What you just start off saying is a great strategy. Going to your kid once a month, probably the beginning of the month, and ask that child, what can I do this month for this next month to make myself a better father for you or better dad for you? What is it I can change or shift and create for you to make myself a better dad for you? And if the child says, well, I don't know, well, let me throw some things out there and you tell me what it is that I need to work on. I could be better at paying attention to you. I could be better at controlling my emotions. I could be better at... So you can give some examples. But a lot of older kids, older meaning probably 6 and up, if you ask them, they'll share something with you. If they don't, that's a problem.
Red flag, huh?
That's a huge problem. That's an indicator.
Should we vow to like take a month of silence for that? If your kids have nothing to say to you, maybe just spend a month being quiet. Maybe that's just me.
It's a drastic strategy.
Yeah, I take a vow of silence then. I'll let you have space for a month.
That is, yeah, we laugh at that, but that is exactly what I have done. Taking a vow of silence, if you will, refraining from any judgment or criticism. So I don't do so. So it's better not to say anything at all. And that's why I sit in the space of silence when Jasmine is speaking.
Okay, so we talked a little about adversity intelligence, and I can take a deep breath knowing that even if I use all these gentle parenting and this conscious parenting, and I really allow my child to become who he or she is meant to be, and it's not going to create someone who's too fragile to handle life. So with the adversity intelligence being kind of an intellectual side, I know how to handle hard things. I know I can do this. I've got this internal dialogue now because I've broken my arm and I've survived, right? I've gotten stung by the bee and I've survived. I've done hard things. I've had social conflict, right? And my mom didn't rescue me or my dad didn't rescue me from those moments, and I learned some things. In the process, I'm feeling my feelings, right? Through all of those adverse moments, I felt my feelings. I had space and freedom to do so. No one was judging me in that process. So I create resiliency in the emotional side, right? As I'm going through. So now say I'm a parent who didn't experience conscious parenting as a child. I didn't have that kind of upbringing or opportunity to know that I could feel my feelings. Like, I'm 39 and I'm still working on how do I sit with the discomfort of my feelings and move through that and let the energy pass. Like, that's a new practice even for me. So as a parent who maybe didn't have a conscious parenting upbringing, and I'm a parent who maybe has some difficulty with emotional resilience, could you tell me, one, what does emotional resilience really mean as a conscious parent? I'm developing emotional resilience so that I can give that to my child, right? I'm modeling, I'm creating a space where that's something we're working through. So what is emotional resilience as a clear definition? So as a new up-and-coming conscious parent, I understand it better. And then also, if I'm having a hard time with it, what does that do to my child? What kind of space am I creating?
What that does to your child is, in a lot of ways, spiritually deforming the character. That's my immediate response to that.
Ouch.
Oh. Did you just say ouch?
Yeah.
I know my language is harsh, but I need to make a point.
I know, you do make a really great point, but man, that is acute.
Yes. And I think that's a powerful question because it's an important question. And every parent needs to cultivate, in some ways, resilience. And how you do that is really allowing... It's practice, one part. Being comfortable and recognizing that you're uncomfortable with suffering. So it requires a shift in your perceptual set. I think parents have to show perceptual adaptation to life. It's called evolution, yes? Yeah. So shifting your perceptual set or narrative or language would be, if the child is having a temper tantrum in the middle of the room, embrace it. using that kind of language. I welcome this. Please louder. The louder, the stronger, the longer, the better. So you're staying present to what is. And then part of that shift of that perceptual set or understanding is knowing that the child is just merely communicating. Kind of like when you have an attitude and you tell your child to, simmer down or be calm, and you are upset. You have to recognize that children should have that luxury as well. And for me, anytime a child screams and yells, the louder it is, the greater it is. I see that as a privilege. So that's what I mean by shifting your narrative and your perceptual set. Your understanding that what is happening in the moment just happens. And that because it's a privilege, I get to see and feel and experience this moment with a child. It's a miracle. So I don't, it's not as if I don't interpret situations as negative. Sometimes it's hard to see two kids fighting, right? Or arguing.
Yeah.
But that's my judgment. And you recall, I've said before, sometimes we confuse judgment with thinking. And most of the time, by the way, we're judging, thinking that we're thinking. That's a problem. If we're not conscious of that, then those things that arise in our children, it's going to be difficult for us to tolerate. Because what the children do is nothing not to be tolerating. It's your inability to be resilient to that moment.
So we're asking them to calm down and to simmer and to chill and to be quiet and to be all these things because, if I hear you correctly, our own adversity intelligence and our own emotional resilience is really lacking. So we can't sit in the presence of someone else who is just expressing themselves because really it's about me being uncomfortable.
So Ellen, that is a great response.
That's exactly. It comes back to me every time.
Have you ever wondered why your children is not showing resilience? Where's that coming from? Right?
Yep.
Yeah, the moment you say to the child, calm down, what part of that reflect for the child resilience?
Right.
You can't even tolerate that.
Yeah.
Or how do you expect a child to calm down?
Yeah.
So, you gotta be mindful of those things.
So would it be okay in that moment if somebody, say, starts to throw a really good raging tantrum to just sit down and say out loud, I don't feel like I feel agitated by this, and I notice in myself that when you are escalating, I get frustrated. Now I'm going to try to just sit with you. Like, could as a parent, could I just walk myself through this doesn't feel good? Because our kids' tantrums in the middle of public do bring up all kinds of emotions, right? That's part of our social programming is that, and we talked about this too, the difference between respect versus conforming, right? When my child looks disrespectful, again, air quotes, really they're not conforming to social norms in a setting. So I'm at, Walmart or a restaurant and they're losing it. If I go sit with them, is it okay for me to just narrate through my not feeling good about it until I kind of come to the part where I can then just choose to be non-judgmental and patient and like, hey, I'm trying something new here. While you scream and have a tantrum, I'm just gonna, practice this whole thing. Is that an okay space to walk through all of that, or should I be doing that before, or should I be doing it after? Or
that's a great question. Yeah. You could narrate it, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Because you're present already. The child's there and they're watching, they're learning, they're listening, and you're just learning too. I guess you could. I mean, if I could stretch conscious parenting and say, yeah, sure, express yourself because it's authentic, right?
Right.
Is it? So you have to realize and recognize what your intention is. And when you start doing that, you really miss, I think, you can miss what's happening in the moment with that child. So, yes, sure, I get frustrated all the time. I get, well, maybe not all the time, but I get frustrated and agitated and irritated at circumstances and situations, and I could express myself freely. After all, I have the right to do so, right? To express my child, so that I can teach my child to be more relationally intelligent and more socially intelligent, to recognize that they need to know that when you act out, I hurt. But it's not about me.
Yeah, motivation would be huge, because if I'm just going to give you a deluge of information about how uncomfortable you're making me out, that would backfire for sure.
That's so hard to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, initially, right, the not getting stuck in your thought train and you're narrating it out, the discomfort, like, for me, it is like if I'm talking out loud, I'd look like a crazy person. Like in those moments sometimes, right? And we talked about this last episode, where if you are in that mode of being a conscious parent, for whatever reason, things are not getting to you, or you're just noticing better, right? It's actually easier, right?
Yeah.
If you can get past are they judging me? Like all the people looking at me in Walmart.
Yeah.
You get past that, then it's actually like, I don't have to figure anything out. I just have to, let it take its process and stuff.
Think about the narrative sometimes. I hear parents say, hey, when you act out that way, don't you see that you hurt my feelings? You're being disrespectful?
You're embarrassing me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think the child doesn't know that? The child doesn't wake up first thing in the morning and write down a list of names which he intends to embarrass or hurt. The child's just reactive and emotional. It's really not about you.
Right.
As a parent, as a matter of fact, if anything, you should expect and set demands and standards on yourself to be more present and calm and respectful. Conscious parenting is easy if you set aside your own ego.
Yeah. We're in the Lenten season right now too, so this could be like your thing if you're gonna do, right?
Let go of ego. I like it.
Yeah,
That's
or I'm not gonna say
great.
this thing, right? I'm gonna give up saying you need to, or so, I don't know.
Your catchphrases.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it is
Maybe
not
it's
so
good job.
easy, right? As we're learning, because we have ego. Yes.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, conscious parenting is not the absence of ego. It's just recognizing and being present to it when it rears its ugly head.
So, simple question, Con, what's individuation?
The process by which the child, if given the opportunity, they separate themselves from family. So they're independent and autonomous that way. So children will naturally identify, and because the family system is powerful, right? You can't help but to engage in traditions. Yeah. But when they are overly involved or over-identify, then it becomes quite pathological. Reason being is there's no authenticity. There's no individual self. So individuation process is a personal developmental process that allows them to separate themselves and see themselves as separate entity and in and of themselves, which is a healthy process.
What age do we start to see that develop?
Depends. It's different. You start to, I say 2 years old, because that's when they really recognize that they are, and you see the maybe the behavior changes there, right?
Where they start to have a will and an opinion and a way of doing things they'd really like you to stick to.
Yeah. So
We ascribe negative terms to it, right? But really,
Yeah,
it's just independence
I'm hearing your
emerging.
tone when you're saying that.
Because we put these, we put these labels on it that are just so rich with judgment on them.
Yeah,
But
the
How
terrible
dare they
twos.
express themselves?
yeah,
The terrible 2s, the treacherous 3s, the sassy 6s. I mean, there's
right.
terms.
Like,
for
when are
those
they
ages.
good? What are the labels we use for these phases of life positive.
And that's a great point. Right there, we start off with this negative connotation, and then we respond accordingly, creating that very thing. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to recognize that that's maybe what we've been modeled, and then make a conscious choice to put that aside and create a space for something new to develop.
I think it's neat because I feel like here they have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
They have the space.
Yeah, to flex that will muscle that they've got and do it in a way that's still pro-social, really, because they're respecting one another's rights to make choices.
And build their identity with it, too.
Yeah.
And then the individuation process, I see there it's the need for privacy, right? Sometimes they need their own space. Haven't you had your children express that? And self-reflection during that moment, allow that process, to give your child that space. I know parents want to be involved, and sometimes the hyper parenting, where they feel like they need to know everything. This one thing I do not do, I'll give you an example, more practical example. I don't ask Jasmine how school was, ever. And if she wants to share with me, she can share with me. And I don't inquire that way. I just can't do it because as I'm observing and scrutinizing my intentions, I don't know where that is going. So it's better for me just to pick her up. We drive home. And Jasmine, she talks. You know, my daughter, she talks. She's going to talk anyway. And she shares what she shares. But, yeah, I think it's called being nosy. But, of course, we look at children. We often point that out with children. Just stop being nosy. Where do you think that's coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about that the other day, especially in a setting like Wildflower. It challenges parents on all of those levels of individuation, because the standardized setting tells us as parents we're supposed to ask every day. What happened at school? How are you doing with this? We're expected to check progress reports. We're expected to be on the online setting that shows every class, if you were late, if you had an assignment, if you got early out or you did not, what is the reason? There's this other narrative out there that says that's our job, is to constantly be checking in. But then when you look at their need, again, from a developmental perspective, not this ideation of standard learning, content-based things that we've developed, not based on psychology or human development. It's this arbitrary external source of information. But it changes the conversations we have with our kids, and I think that challenges us as parents because we thought we knew what we were doing. We thought we knew what we were supposed to do. And then you come into a conversation about adverse intelligence and emotional resilience and this independent developing of our own being, and now we're supposed to have this other role. So I think for parents there's going to be a shift, and that's going to be, again, this like, while your kiddos are here with us learning how to be themselves, it's going to change the conversations on the car ride home, or it should, because you're not asking about school, you're not asking about assignments, you're not asking all of those types of questions. We've moved into this other realm, which also could be really rich and really beautiful and really liberating for everyone if, as a parent, we make that conscious step over into that transition where we really do respect their need for privacy and their ability to decide what they want to share with us, and us being okay not knowing every single minute detail, which might be new for some of our families.
Yeah, respect their privacy. I appreciate you saying that, but that's why I don't ask. Because as I trace my intention, when she is ready, she will share that with me. And often she's ready because she knows that I'm not going to judge her. And when you start that thinking that I have to ask because that's what proper parents or good parents do, so I know what's going on in my life, it's like it makes me wonder what that really means. You have to be really mindful and to really take a step back, and it's not easy because we work under a system of fear, and it influences and affects how we parent, and then we call it parenting, but it's really an attempt to try to control.
I liked what you touched on with trust there. They'll come to you, right, if they actually need the help. They'll seek it because they're not going to feel judged, right? That's where good advice can come in, I suppose, sometimes. But, right, the reaction is often, where the scenario is often like the parents are controlling, but also then think their kid's going to tell them everything and they won't lie to them. Or that's the expectation. Like, you need to tell me these things.
Yeah, without cultivating that place of trust and openness so that they can tell you anything without you becoming this other entity that's not loving or open or compassionate anymore.
How do you go about fixing a relationship where you have now a lack of trust with a parent and a child?
Between parent and child?
Yeah.
If there's a lack of trust, I talk a lot about honoring their space, and allowing the child to be the inquirer, the one that facilitates communication. And then I talk about this, the best way to foster trust between you and your child is to listen. It just comes down to that. Listen is powerful. Because when you're listening, they feel validated. Validation leads to that trust, right? Experience. They feel that in your acknowledgement of their feelings, it builds trust there. Listen, and you don't listen to more. That's what you do. It's called validation.
Excuse me. We asked parents to give us some questions based off of either the parent workshop training they had or the last episode. The first one is, how do we cultivate resilience in a child without the tough love approach? But we've already touched on that, so we're good there. We also, another question was, how do you not lose your temper when you're in Walmart and your kid is, losing theirs, perhaps?
Yeah.
But again, you've addressed that, right? It's just getting into the present moment and noticing this tendency to want to fix things or get embarrassed by things. And
you may lose your temper, and that's okay too. But recognize that you are, and then when the opportunity arises, apologize.
Okay. So the next question I have is a parent had was, how do you manage boundaries that you feel are necessary? And then on top of that, when you're saying no to your child, what's that look like in a conscious way? And there, a fear with this was, if you're not consistently having boundaries, they're going to have strong reactions emotionally. And so how do you manage that piece?
They'll learn the boundaries. They'll be conscious enough, and the perspective will be wide enough to understand the importance of that. Anyway, but why not? The best way to teach kids boundaries is you demonstrating it. This is an example I use often. Ask for permission. Ask the child for permission to enter her room or his room before you enter the room. Speak in a tone or in a manner in which resonates respect. What I do with Jasmine, I gauge where her tone is and I speak lower. When I speak to her, And one of the best way to demonstrate respect is just paying attention, just listening to what the child's feeling in the validation. The validation is your leverage. No, not the leverage, but the validation. That process allows you to have leverage. The more you listen to a child, the more connected, right? And that child feels connected. And they don't want to do wrong because they, quote unquote, respect you. So boundaries, sure, there are boundaries. Even conscious parenting set, like bedtime is at 8, right? Maybe you want the child to eat at the dinner table. Make it pleasant. Sometimes they don't want to because it's not pleasant or it's not productive. So you have boundaries. I'm thinking in terms of conscious boundaries, which is a concept that applies to parents. Understanding your limitation, for example, your restrictions, your standards, all of that and more play a role in the child's ability to learn boundaries. There's a lot more we could speak to regarding that, but are there any other specific question regarding boundaries I could help
So
with
this parent was thinking about candy,
Oh, yeah.
and their child likes candy, like every child. And so, she's not wanting to harm her kid by them over consuming sugar.
Sure, yes.
And so she has a boundary at a certain point. Now, maybe part of the work is figuring that out clearly with your kid, discussing that together.
That is right, yeah. Yeah, so, having a conversation with the child, helping the child understand. And you may set boundaries in the form of what it appears for the child to have a semblance of control. So instead of eating 10 max size Snickers, you can give an option. Why don't we start with an inch of this today? We'll save this for tomorrow. How exciting is that? Make it a game for the child. And so the child may resist and say, how about half of that? I said, how about a third of that? So there are ways that you can communicate with the child, that you can collaborate.
I think there's an underlying current in this question that I'd like to challenge just a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
The concept that conscious parenting somehow has a lack of boundaries involved in the process. I think there's something even deeper in the question than how do I implement a boundary within conscious parenting consciously versus not having had boundaries. Now that we have a boundary, how are we going to go about the implementation of this new? Because I think, again, you're coming back to if I'm modeling healthy boundaries, then there we go. We have boundaries within conscious parenting. It's not a lack of boundaries with my child and I, or with me and myself. It's just implementing it in a way that's conscious and healthy. Am I off on that? I would hate for someone to think that conscious parenting meant like, hey, it's whatever. Like this absent kind of parenting or this, where I'm so hands off that I don't have any, it might even be just the furniture in your house is a healthy boundary. If I have a kid who likes to bounce and jump and run and be really active, I might make choices about my furniture that would be different than if I had a very, mature in age child now who is more self-regulated and isn't as active. Even that is a healthy boundary, right? I'm implementing an environment where they can be who they are, and I can still make sure that they're not going to crack their head open on a coffee table because maybe the coffee table is a bad idea for right now and I just put it somewhere else, I would hate for conscious parenting to get the rap of not having healthy sets of boundaries. It's even me saying I need to go to bed at this time of night. If you don't go to bed until 9:30, you push my bedtime because there's just things parents have to do to, put the house to bed basically. So I have conversations with my girls. Bedtime is at this time, 1, for your body to be healthy, and also 2, for me to protect my own body and my own health. And that's a thing I model because my bedtime is important too. And I really want to go to bed on time. So, how do I make sure that as a family we're flowing in a way that everybody has the opportunity to be healthy and feel taken care of? And if you're going to change the line of a boundary, then you better, as a parent, be really ready. If it's a black and white issue, Dr. Shafali talks about this too. Which of my boundaries, do an inventory.
Right.
Which of my boundaries are flexible? And then which of mine are hard and fast? Because if I am ambiguous in that, my kids won't know that's a black and white, or I can negotiate. This is a negotiable issue. This is just hard and fast for me. I think there's a little bit of work on the parent side to do before we come into the conversation and then say, hey, this might be kind of new because this one actually is black and white for me. I'm not willing to negotiate with you on, I guess, if it's sugar consumption, or mine would be, bedtime just has to be bedtime. Then maybe within that, how do we implement it could be, some points of negotiation and conversation.
Based off of that too, I suppose with the food thing, you're buying the food. So if you don't want them eating the sugar, don't buy it.
Yeah,
Now, once they become a teenager and can go buy their own.
Right, you hope that you've instilled what you can by then, because they're very independent.
You start early, right?
They're autonomous and independent by the time you're there.
Well, and this is a whole different conversation, but how much of it, I mean, there's thinking out there of where you let them go through that and just keep modeling it and hope they come out the other end.
Right. But I think you're
way.
right in the boundary of I have a choice of what to buy with my money. I think that is a really great point, because once they have a job or they have allowance, they're doing chores, they're whatever your currency is in your house. If they have their own money, how do you now say this is what you can and can't spend your own money on, but you do have the ability to set a boundary within your own grocery budget or your own eating practices. Are you running through the drive-thru every night and then you're like, hey, don't eat that candy bar?
Right.
Or are we modeling something else? And then, I think sometimes they're going to have to go through it on their own. But to what degree?
Right. And that's with our WJC, which is our governing body, right? We've talked about all of these things over and over and over and keep trying to find the right balance.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a dance.
It's neat for the kids to go through that process, though. Right? We're constantly talking about self-regulation and what that looks like.
It's powerful. I think that's why this self-regulation is the master trait, where resilient is the holy grail. But if the process that the kids go through here helps them with that, cultivate that master trait. In conscious parenting, as I'm listening to both of you, it does go back to the parent every time. That's what conscious parenting is about, is radical accountability.
That's so good. And hard. And good. And hard.
That sucks, because what? I'm taking accountability.
Yeah,
no,
it's still about me. Dang it. I can't pass the buck on anything.
I'm going to blame the both of you for my child being screwed up, right?
It's
so easy to go there, but boy, there's...
I think Dr. Shafali is the one who says your child is just a mirror. And really, you look and you want to pick them apart, but the best thing to do is just look and see what are they reflecting back at me that from within I need to address. And really stop looking at the child as this issue to be fixed or solved or controlled or manipulated, but really looking at ourselves again and again and again and being willing to work on emotional resilience and adversity and being introspective and being willing to do the hard and scary things of looking inside and then allowing ourselves to transform.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful way to put that. And insight is there.
Yeah.
For us as conscious parents, we'll just pause to introspect. Doesn't take much. It takes more energy, I think, to try to coerce kids to think and behave and do. So parenting has come easy for me. All I do is sit back and relax, and Jasmine does her thing. And when she's at the precipice of madness, right, all I do is extend a hand in kind and direct her this way as a conscious parent. And she goes because I have leverage, and that leverage is love and respect for me because I have shown love and respect to her.
Yeah. That's so good.
Okay, last question. Your child's awakening is your awakening. That's in your presentation, one of your slides. Could you describe what that means?
Yes, if you let her be, freely be, and just to be through conscious effort, the child will transform into this thing of beauty. Beauty in the many ways you expect her to be, whether it's respectful or conscious or empathic or sensitive or kind. And what that will create, if you're open enough and understand that what you have created through your conscious effort, this being that is your child will awaken to this path of great intelligence, the social, emotional, environmental, intellectual humility, which then will allow you to awaken. I think that's what children can do if you set aside all expectations and judgment and not see them or not infantilize them. You see something much more remarkable, things that they have, traits that they have, or contain, are things I assure you wish you had. So your child's awakening is your awakening. To produce that awakening in the child, you create that space for the process of awakening, and you do so through the lens of consciousness.
Cultivating consciousness, that's what it's all about, huh?
We started that way, it's going to end that way. It's
all
I don't know how
connected.
I don't know how else I could better word that to convince parents. This is consider that, try it out, and see what happens to you as a parent.
I think it's powerful to allow our children the opportunity to be something that sparks transformation in us. I think that's a beautiful gift that they offer us. Whether we take them up on that or not depends on our degree of openness to this thing called awakening and consciousness. But we have in front of us the opportunity to, yes, see some of our flaws, and yes, see some of the areas of growth that we have opportunity to invest in. And sometimes those are hard things. But we also have the opportunity for them to reflect back and infuse us with just this joy and exuberance for life and a love of simple, small things and a way to be content and, with not quite so much striving and racing and searching. And they just have the opportunity to give us such treasures in life if we'll slow down and just be willing to catch that flow and go where they take us and embrace the hard and then really just relish the good that comes along with that.
All right, everyone. Thanks for sitting down to discuss.
Yeah, thanks, Dr.
Well, thank you again.
super thankful for all the ones we get to watch bloom.
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for sitting down to discuss. It's been really good, I feel like.
Yeah, this is a deep, deep one.
And maybe we do this again in the future. Again. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Dr.
Well,
Tran.
thank you again.